about it because it's early in the journey of the rabbit hole. So very happy to be here, Jeff and Greg. It's an honor. A lot of great people all around. So it's my first time in Boston ever. I'm from Denmark. I kind of live in LA. Larry here was kind, Larry Lepard, to give me a tour of Boston and the old historic places. And what happened back then, we all know, you should know better than me, you're American, right? But you had to fight for your freedom physically, with guns and blood and the Boston Massacre and all that. But Bitcoin is probably, with all due respect, an even more important revolution because it's globally. And the beautiful thing, it's non-violent. So it's beautiful. Bitcoin is beautiful, and Bitcoin is Boston as well. Love it. Thanks for having us. Now, thank you for that today, Larry. So what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom is the ability to take a nap whenever I want, wherever I want. And not have Foss take my fucking photo and put it on the goddamn Twitter. Foss is going to pay for that. I'm telling you, you are going to pay. You just don't know when yet. It's a debt owed that I'm going to collect. But look, freedom is having honest money. Freedom is having money that the government can't print. It's having the ability to prevent the government from stealing from us and being the corrupt assholes that they are. And this is bigger than any one of us. This is bigger than just Boston. It is worldwide. And this is going to fix. My byline on Twitter is fix the money, fix the world. The base layer is broke. When the base layer is broken, you get corruption everywhere. If we can fix the base layer, which everybody in this room believes we can, then the rest will fall in place. And the really great news is they can't stop it. It's like, evil laugh time. Whoa, they're fucked. They're completely fucked. I mean, they're going to try and stop it, but they can't. And that's a beautiful thing. And my view is it's going to probably happen before the mid-2030s. It could happen in the late 2020s, complete hyper-Bitcoinization. And, just the same way the Soviet Union fell, or the same way, I use this as an example of how things happen, how quickly they happen in today's world. 1 week, Silicon Valley Bank was fine, totally fine. Nobody knew it was going, there was a problem. A couple of venture capitalists looked at the balance sheet. The balance sheet statements came out. They realized they had some held to maturity stuff that was underwater. They sold it, they took a loss, that got reported. A large venture capital guy out in Silicon Valley said, holy shit, all you guys pull your money. One day, $42 billion asked for redemption. One day. Next day, $100 billion. Whole bank's assets were $170 billion. Bank was gone. That's it. All over 2 days. Okay? Soviet Union, way back when, fell. Took a little longer than 2 days. My point is, you don't want to miss this. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not trying to be a doom monger. I'm not trying to predict when it happens. But when it does happen, when the consensus is this fiat currency is absolutely fucking worthless, the way it was in Weimar in 1923, it's going to be over really fast. And if you have fiat currency, it's going to be worthless. And if you have land or property or things or food or guns or Bitcoin or silver or gold, you're going to at least have something that maintains its purchasing power in the new world. And at that point in time, we'll build back the new world on a sound basis. And it's going to be a really beautiful thing. Our kids are going to live in a much better world than the world that we live in. So that's my view of freedom.
Beautiful. David, so I don't know how many, do you know all of the people on the panel here? Also, that was actually my job, I guess, but that's... Hey, that's what happens when you're volunteering to do jobs. So Larry and David here, they have a fund together, Sound Money Fund, sorry?
No, that's your EMA.
That's the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, yeah. So yeah, the two of you and Greg Foss and a bunch of other wonderful people, really smart, are doing a Bitcoin Opportunity Fund. Let's focus on who's present for sure. So David, you work with Larry on the Sound Money Fund. Why would you do that?
I forced him.
Yeah, no, I think, like Larry for years has orange pilled me and sound money pilled me. And, to your point on what's freedom, for me, I'm kind of more math oriented where, it's kind of some of the stuff too that, like Greg was saying in the beginning, it's like you got political parties that both pull the wools over people's eyes, right? And lobbyists have controlled things, and we could all point out examples on both sides, whether it's Nancy Pelosi's insider trading or on the Republican side, other junk. And you look at the money supply, and it's grown at 7.1% on average per year since 1971, going off the gold standard. And so we all talk about, is inflation 4%? Is it 3%? Are we going to get back to Powell's 2.5% target? To me, it's about money supply growth of 7.1%. And yet no one talks about that. It's boring, and it's too quantitative, all that. But I think what I see is eventually, like, we're going to get back to like what Larry's just saying. Like, people will wake up and realize that, how ridiculous this is, and how it's just a bunch of lies. And it's because the system's so levered, right? We're levered at every entity. We're 132% debt to GDP now. In 1978 with Volcker, that was 38% debt to GDP. It's much more fragile now. And so here's Powell going with a Volcker playbook, probably going to raise rates again next month, not realizing that he's about to just break this fragile system even more, and not realizing that most of the wealth gaps in society were created by the Federal Reserve. And that's what drove me to understand Bitcoin and freedom, of all of our problems of civil war, if you will, of going right versus left. It's all been created by unsound money, and eventually this will be the solution. And I think, as Jason pointed out, I think people will wake up more and more to that over time, and that will spell freedom eventually, and back to a fair and equal system.
Nice, thank you. So you all know Jason, of course. Had a chance to introduce himself before. That was great. So thanks for what you're doing with the whole progressive, the liberal side. We need everyone in Bitcoin, of course, and everyone will become Bitcoiners eventually. As you said, it's going to be not Bitcoiners, it's going to be people. What do you think about freedom? I mean, we have the Freedom Festival tomorrow. I hope many of you as possible will be there. I think it's going to be awesome. What does freedom mean to you as a individual, as family, as society?
Yeah, I think the promise of Bitcoin is a fair and transparent system, and everybody plays by the same rules. And I think that if you can develop a system and build off of a sound money system that people understand, then the world becomes a more fair place. And I think that's critical for, you talk about freedom. The United States in particular has had such an unfair advantage since 1971, or the mid-70s. And it's when you sit down and think about what would the world look like if there was no sort of global reserve currency that a nation controlled and got to benefit from in that way, and the world becomes just a more flat, open, peer-to-peer, no government can control the monetary system. That strikes me as a phenomenal opportunity. It will usher in a fairness, solid economic growth for everybody, or for more people than now at least. And I think that's exciting. So I think that you build something solid, then the freedom and the fairness all comes from that. That's really how I think about it.
Awesome, beautiful. Beautiful people, beautiful minds, Bitcoin minds. Greg Foss. My job is going to be easy now because Greg has a mic, so freedom to you, Greg.
I thought that you were going to bypass me, so I should have had a more planned, but here, look, freedom is this. You are able to express your choice. You have to be accepting of other people who have an opposite view of you, but you are not going to be persecuted having a different viewpoint than, Here's something interesting. In Canada, where I'm from, the color blue in a political party is actually the Conservatives. And the party that's red is the Liberals, where in the United States it's flipped. But here's something I learned today. I didn't even know what the term progressive meant. But did you know that the party in Canada, it's the Conservative Party, are called the Progressive Conservatives? I'm not sure what that quite means, and if it's flipping, US politics on its ear, but freedom to me means you don't have to fit in a box, okay? There is no unique box that describes anybody. You are free to be what you want. I try to be respectful. I don't do a great job of it all the time, of people who don't have the same view as I have. But that's what freedom is people who have opposing views, and you try and listen to them. So I need to say once again, freedom is Boston. My family's 5th generation Canadian, but do you know where we landed? Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we went north. I guess we weren't that smart, where the snow is, okay? But there should not even be a border in many cases. Like we all landed in North America with a common dream and a common goal. So I'm pretty pumped. If I was a United States voter, I know I would align with the Republicans. But that doesn't mean I'm not open to, I would have voted for Obama in his first term. I didn't, because I'm not a voter, but I would tell you. I would also tell you that I'm pretty jazzed about this guy, Kennedy, all right? Now, doesn't mean that you have to believe me, and I don't want you to, but I'm just saying I'm free to have that expression. So there's people who have lost their lives over this and fought for freedom, and I thank those freedom fighters for allowing me and allowing my children to express their views independently. They don't have to fit in whatever box I want them to. They are free to fit wherever they want. And thank you to everybody who fights for that. It is a privilege. And some people, particularly in Canada, we take it for granted. And eventually, some of those freedoms get taken away from you. And then thank God for the Canadian truckers who stood up for freedom, right? So.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of people, we've had global reserve currencies several times in the world, and the funny thing is they usually last around 100 years. And now the US dollar has been around for 100 years. And I think a lot of people in US and around the world think, well, I mean, US will never default. When you default on your debt, your obligations, when you run away from debt that you have, that's a default. So, Larry, I think you know where I'm going with this, maybe, but do you think that US will default? Do you think they have defaulted before? Where do we stand in that?
Well, yeah, first of all, they defaulted multiple times. They defaulted in 1971. They had an obligation to pay back foreign debt, well, they didn't. So we screwed the French and everyone else who had taken our dollars. They also defaulted in 1933 when they grabbed all the gold and basically then revalued it 70% lower in real terms. So that was, they cheated from all those people that saved. And I'll never forget, my grandfather hated FDR for that reason. I mean, admired him for winning the war, but hated him for what he had done and basically robbed the American people. They semi-defaulted in 1865 in the Civil War. In 1862, actually, they printed greenbacks to fund the Civil War, so it was a semi-default. And before the country was even formed, Continental Congress managed to pay a bunch of soldiers to fight, the French and Indians and others, and they printed something called the Continental, and of course the saying, it's not as good as the Continental, was based on the hyperinflation that occurred pre the Constitution, and which, by the way, is why the Constitution says only gold and silver can be money. And of course, like so many other things, it's a dead letter. The founding documents of this country are beyond reproach. I mean, they're just probably the finest political documents ever written. Although I was reminded, I was in Switzerland, I was with a very big Swiss gold bug. We were talking about how there's good and evil in everybody. He said, Larry, that's right, those guys were really good guys, but you do recognize that they have slaves and they slaughtered the Indians, right? and yeah, he made a good point. I said, yeah, I'll concede that. having said that, those founding documents are still really great. The problem is, as Anders and I were talking about today, as we wandered around the Old South Meeting House, we saw where the Boston Massacre was, and we kind of looked through the history of, the shot heard one in the world and understood what happened and so forth. The problem is that, humans are flawed, and these paper documents get interpreted, and they just slowly but surely got chipped away, so they print greenbacks in 1865, and states' rights, well, sorry, southern states, we're only kidding. You really got to be part of us. We're centralizing the whole fucking place. Of course, they're on the wrong side of it because they believe in slavery, but I mean, then, oh, we've got these banking panics. Guess what? I think we really need this Federal Reserve. It's going to solve these banking panic problems. Yeah, right. It's a money trust, and that was the beginning of the end, and it's just continued. It's kind of amazing to me it's made it this far. It's even amazing to me that we are where we are right now, given the Silicon Valley Bank. When I thought, okay, that'll be it. It's all over. But these fiat guys are crafty. These guys are really, really good at kicking the can. I mean, probably the best ever. And they've got this BTFP thing, which I call buy the fucking paper, right? And they've got this BTFP thing, and they calm the court down, and it's all good. Our money's good, no problem. We'll just go on. But to me, what's going on right now is this is Bear Stearns going BK in March of 2008, and I was short stock at the time. And in September, October of 2008, it was all over. And so what you're seeing right now, in my opinion, is you've got the tremors, the earthquake's coming, and so, I mean, stay tuned, because the next 18 months are going to be fucking wild. I mean, it's going to be one hell of a ride, and when that starts, Bitcoin's going to go through 100,000 in minutes, and gold's going through 3,000 in minutes, and so, it's all coming. We just got to be patient.
Thank you. Jason, I think, first of all, it was a great presentation you had before. It was really interesting to read, to understand the process of writing the book. And I think it's unique or interesting, because you're right, you were talking about politics, that you're on the left and most Bitcoiners are on the right. I think a lot of people in Bitcoin maybe started on the left and then they go right. I personally did that. But how do you see these political differences that we have? Will you feel that will continue in the future? We'll have the left and the right, or do you think that Bitcoin will solve some of the issues that we actually on both sides care about? Or will it bring us together? Will Bitcoin bring us together, or?
Yeah, not by itself. I think, in this space, you hear a lot that, okay, well, Bitcoin fixes this or Bitcoin solves this. I don't think Bitcoin is the last step for any of it. I think it's a first step. And whatever you want to achieve with Bitcoin, and a lot of people have mentioned really important things, I think Bitcoin is step 0. And then you need to work. You need to get a coalition. You need to have people working on the ground to achieve those goals. I think that I don't think it's going to solve our political disagreements necessarily. I still think that there's substantive disagreements between different people on the political spectrum that's not going to go away, and I don't think that it should. Like, having an open dialogue, competition of ideas is an important thing. But hopefully what Bitcoin does do is allow us to actually have more thoughtful, interesting conversations. And one of the things I love about Bitcoin is that there is no way to learn about Bitcoin without learning about the legacy financial system. You have to learn, and a lot of people don't know how our money works. And because of that, they get taken advantage of, or they get pitted against one another. And there's a lot of things that just ordinary, regular people can learn about how our system works now by learning about Bitcoin. And I think that pushing an education, hey, you should learn about Bitcoin. I know that if they learn about Bitcoin, they're automatically going to learn about like what the Federal Reserve actually does and all of that. So I think that's hope, because once you start learning how the system actually works, then you start to not like it, and you want to replace it. And I think that there's opportunities for people to have really meaningful conversations. Not to get rid of like any sort of political discord completely. I just think that we should be having more serious conversations with one another.
Interesting, thank you. David, sorry, I had
Senior moment.
a senior moment. Yeah, I guess I'm getting closer to that. David, Bitcoin has been pumping lately. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's the alternative, I guess. But it's look, I think, you know, as Jason talked about earlier in his speech, you know, to his students, like it's don't get caught up in the day trading, right? I mean, naturally, all of us want it to go up, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I was just Greg and I were working today, and Larry and I were just talking. You look at like technical analysis on this stuff. Look, it's an upward channel, and theoretically, kind of, if you look at now, good technicians would say, look, between 26,000 or 23,000 and 36,000, it's up, and you'll hear Greg saying he's right. Don't get caught up in the B&Q. Don't worry about it. This is, you know, we're a $500 billion asset class in a world of 700 trillion in global assets. Gold's 10 trillion. This is 500 billion, and we've got all this bond money of 150 trillion. All this stuff's going to rotate in. BlackRock, it begins with, you know, in this week, you can see that, where it's like, okay, people realizing this institutional asset group, rather, is going to start adopting this. I think, though, if you think of this upward channel, I mean, the question I have is, you know, just like in 2021 and 20, when you get these fiscal crises where they print 25%, you know, the 7.1% money supply growth goes to 25% 2 years in a row, suddenly you get these moonshots because we go way above those bands. And I think that that's probably where we are as we've begun the next bull market. And as Larry says, events will unfold on the next 18 to 24 months that probably force the Fed to come right back with QE, and then off we go again. And everyone will realize that this was a global leverage system, that the Bank of England's bailing out pension funds again, and here we, you know, just goes on and on. And so it's just math, as Greg says, and I think that's where it is. But yeah, certainly, you know, markets will market, and I think that you know, we're all in the right space, and we're going to watch these assets go a lot higher over time.
Definitely feels like the right space to be in Bitcoin. Foss, it was actually, thank you for that. It was a perfect lead-in, because I want to ask Foss about, I guess most of us expect the Fed maybe or maybe not to raise anymore. We're probably close to that maximum level of the interest rate, and then the question is, when will the QE coming, the money printing, when will potentially interest rate reductions happen? What's your thoughts on that, Foss? Foss traded bonds for 30 years, so he knows about interest rates.
So to be very honest, I think we're at the upper end of interest rate increases, purely because the system can't absorb this level of interest rate. Interest rate expense on the US federal debt outstanding is going to surpass $1 trillion this year, which will exceed the defense budget. Okay, the United States is now spending more money on its interest expense than it is on national defense. Soon it will become the entire budget. By the year 2052, at interest rates that are lower than they are today, the current federal revenues of $4 trillion will all be used to pay interest expense on the debt. Okay, so you don't run a budget, a household budget that way. You can't run a country budget that way unless you can print money. Because printing money is the error term. It solves the mathematic circularity of an expanding debt spiral by being able to pay the interest expense with newly printed money, which causes debasement, which means the only thing I'm 100% certain of is that fiat money will continue to debase. That is pure mathematics. Everything else, you have probabilities, but you can't be certain. So stick with what you're certain with, which is that fiat money will continue to debase, and structure your portfolio accordingly. Own hard assets over soft assets. What are soft assets? They are bonds. What are bonds? A bond is a fiat contract. Fiat contract. They can pay you back by printing more money. That's not outside of the realm of the contract. So the question then becomes, when do people stop accepting the newly printed money and the system stops? I don't want it to happen, but history tells us that it happens. So why is this, why are we where we are? And Larry said, so firstly, if I'm not mistaken, the latest federal program that's not QE, yeah, baloney, but it's not QE, it's called BTFP. If I'm not mistaken, that does stand for Bank Term Funding Program, correct? Now, Larry said it stood for buy the effing paper, and I think it stands for backstop the fiat Ponzi. Okay, because again, it's only math. It's backstopping the fiat Ponzi, because they can pretend they're not doing QE, but they cannot do QE, because then math breaks and the system breaks. So you gotta look at what you know for sure. And here's the other thing. I like to think that total global financial assets, David just said 700 trillion. I think it's actually 900 trillion. But what's $200 trillion amongst friends, okay? That is why Bitcoin is so infinitesimally small compared to global financial assets. So you don't overthink these things. And you don't do Bollinger Band analysis on Bitcoin, and you don't do, oh my God, we're hitting the Fibonacci retracement level on fucking Bitcoin. Like, sorry, I don't want to swear as much as Larry does, but I'm sitting beside him, but anyway, look, guys. Just please do me a favor. Everybody has their comfort level with Bitcoin in terms of a portfolio exposure. And I've learned something from the Bitcoin community. You know what? I've always said you don't need to be 100% in Bitcoin, right? That's my whole thing. Just own more than zero. There are certain people that should be 100%, by and large, with a liquidity pool of fiat in case of emergencies. Our young kids, between the ages of, less than the age of 30, they're not married, they don't have any financial dependence, they can be 100% in Bitcoin. And I was wrong. And the fiat minimalists or toxic Bitcoin maximalists taught me something. But see, I'm 60 years old, and I got 3 kids, and I got a wife who loves to spend money, and I love her. And, I just can't be 100% in Bitcoin, but I don't need to be. See, that's the thing. That's the beauty of an asymmetric investment opportunity. So I'm going to finish with this. You have in your life, I'm going to tell you, hey, young kids from Purdue and Virginia Tech, listen to this. Take this home with you. You are going to have 5 opportunities in your life to invest in a truly asymmetric upside opportunity. 5, okay? And how do I know that? Because I've had only 5 in my lifetime, and I've done this for 35 years.
Foss,
And
have you explained what an asymmetrical...
what just means asymmetric upside means you can do 100 times your money. Now, equity idiots think that happens on a regular basis. It doesn't, okay? There's only certain numbers of Apples in the world and Amazons, and for every one of those, there's thousands of companies that go bust, okay? But the asymmetry of Bitcoin is going to be one of 5 opportunities you'll have in your life. The first 2 opportunities, you're going to look at it and you're going to talk yourself out of doing it because, oh my God, the government could seize it or something like this. When you talk yourself out of the first 2 opportunities, you miss them. Then the third one, you're actually going to invest in it, and then you're going to triple your money and you're going to get out. And it goes up another 100 times from when you take your money out. Okay? Oh boy, I'm so smart. I tripled my money and I left 97 turns of return on the fucking table. Excuse my language. Okay, so basically, most people will have 2 real chances. And this is the best chance I've ever seen in my life. It's that simple. And the 100% certain thing is that it's fiat money that's going down. So measured in fiat, Bitcoin's going to infinity. But remember, 1 Bitcoin will always equal 1 Bitcoin. And when oil is priced in Bitcoin, we will know we have won. Because oil and energy is the most valuable natural resource there is, and human productivity. So I'm not gonna put timeframes on it. I will just take the 100% certainty that I know, and I will build my risk portfolio around that certainty. I like gold, I like silver, I like real estate, I have exposure to all of that, but Bitcoin blows them out of the water. It's that simple. So stack, save for your kids. That's what I'm giving my kids. They won't get my real estate, they won't get my gold, they won't get my silver, but they will get my Bitcoin. That's it.
Awesome, beautiful. Larry, when I went to school and first had economics, they taught Keynesian economics. And that's what's in the book. And one of the things I learned was that when things were going bad in society, government should spend more money than they earn because to stimulate the economy and get people back in jobs. It's funny though how it works that back before we had a central bank, people also had jobs. You didn't really need to have someone overspend. But we are currently in a situation where unemployment in the US is what, 3.6%, which is low historically, yet the US government has a deficit of, what is it, 9% of
7.1 right now.
7.1% right now compared to
GDP.
of GDP.
Yeah.
Right, so, but of income or revenue, taxes for the government, they overspent despite us having this very low unemployment. What's up with that?
This is just Keynesian economics, right? I mean, it's built on a flawed premise. And BJ, I'll go there, okay? So Keynes was a pedophile. Okay? This is widely known. Okay, he talks about it in his journals. He liked the young boys in Greece. He talks about this. Okay, this was an evil fucking guy. All right, he basically, think about this. Think about this statement. When somebody said, Mr. Keynes, your policy is going to lead to deficits that will continually erode the value of the currency, and you're never going to be able to unwind this. And in the long run, this is going to create a really big problem. And you know what he said? He said, it's not a problem. In the long run, we're all dead. Now, that's a man who doesn't give a fuck about his kids or his grandkids. He didn't have any kids, okay? So that's an evil fucking guy. And yet all of modern economics is built on this evil prick's model for how the system ought to run. That's just complete horseshit. It's just complete and utter horseshit. Sound money created more prosperity in this world between 1789 and 1913 than at any other time in human history. And there was no inflation, almost no inflation. And the 10-cent cigar became a 20-cent cigar when the Federal Reserve came into being. But anyway, long story short, money is a measuring stick, and money should be allocated efficiently. And if it's what we should be, Keynes was premising everything on we need growth. We need economic growth. We need animal spirits. Growth is good. We need bigger numbers. Well, how do you get bigger numbers? You get inflation. So even if you're not selling more units, the price, your sales go up because you inflate the price of them and you've got more sales. You don't need growth. We need efficiency. Efficiency is productivity. It's doing more with less. And the way you do more with less is what our friend Jeff Booth says, which is you have a deflationary world where you get more and more efficient at doing shit cheaper. And so if you have a deflationary money, which Bitcoin is the first form of money ever in the history of the world that's deflationary, you end up having a much better system. And so you've got to make the money match what you want to have occur in the economy, or else you're going to have to continually, these guys they're in a system it's a doom loop. They've got to continually print more and more and more, and meanwhile, deflation is, technology deflation is relentlessly driving the cost of everything produced down. And so these two forces are fighting one another, and the system is going to have to blow up. And it will blow up, and we're at that point now. I thought we were at that point in 2008. Then I thought we were at that point in March of 2020. Then I thought we were at that point in March of this year. And we're still not quite at that point, and it's kind of pissing me off. But we're getting really close to that point, folks. I'm here to tell you, I think we're getting really close to the point at which the system blows up, as it should. And it will be the bright news is on the other side of all this, it will be a much, much better system.
Amen. Jason, one thing that I really paid attention to or stuck on in your presentation was you were doing this free education of students at the school, trying to explain Bitcoin and answer questions, and the economic teacher was there.
Yeah.
What kind of conversation did you guys have after that? I'm actually really curious.
Yeah, so there's a teacher in my school who teaches math like me and also teaches econ. And for a good long while, I said, I would love to just go out and have lunch with you and just ask you questions and talk about Bitcoin. Because he knew about it maybe more than most people, but not in a deep way. And that lunch was really interesting because I sat down with this guy who teaches high school students economics, which is Keynesian all the way. And he sat quietly, he understood what I was saying. He asked me intelligent questions about it. I answered them. And his conclusion at the end of that meeting was like, everything you're saying is true. Because I said, tell me where I'm wrong. Because this is how my understanding of Bitcoin. If I have a blind spot, I would really like to know about it. And we got to the end of the conversation and said, no, I think everything that you said it makes sense and is good. The only problem is that it's deflationary. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, tell me more about that. And it's true that if there is as much debt embedded into the system that we have now, both in private and public debt, a deflationary system is really painful. Because it's all all of the growth, all of the innovation, and all of that is based on really just this debt, which has fueled and greased the wheels of the economy in ways that aren't fair to everybody. So it's a reasonable question to bring up, but his question was totally from the lens of, we need 2% inflation, otherwise the economy can't grow, we can't thrive. And so that was a difficult, I was happy to engage with him, but that was a difficult conversation. And that was sort of the only sticking point that this person could point out, is that we need inflation. And I tried my very best to try to channel Jeff Booth as well as I could. And I haven't quite got him there, but I know where he lives. I'll keep talking to him.
But this is actually a great point, and it shows how powerful. Is this? Yeah. It shows how powerful the media is, that they've convinced pretty much the entire population that it's in your best interest that your money just lose value every year. I mean, how mind-blowing is that? That people are convinced that it's good for us that our money lose value. Bullshit, obviously. And the world's going to change when we have money that increases in purchasing power, obviously. And again, we don't need the money to lose value, so we go and spend and keep other people in jobs, because jobs were there before the central bank. All right, moving on, David, more of a wild card. What really excites you in Bitcoin? It can be from, these days, it can be from any angle. Financially, economic, social, technology. What excites you, and what do you potentially see happening the next couple of years within that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we're involved in this Bitcoin Opportunity Fund that we've just done our first close, and we're continuing to raise money until October, and we're looking at public and private opportunities in space, and including buying Bitcoin itself and trading volatility around it through options markets. We're finding interesting public companies to invest in, and obviously a lot of private companies that are trading at a discount for where they last raised capital. I think the thing that's on the private side, what's interesting is it reminds me a little bit of the late 90s with the internet, right? I mean, when you woke up in 2002 after the tech crash, one of the laughing stock poster childs was pets.com. Everyone said what a stupid business that was, but you fast forward 12, 13 years later, and Petco and Chewy became some of the best e-commerce businesses out there, incredibly free cash flow positive. But what it was is it took 3G, 4G, and 5G. It took the iPhone to come along in the early 2000s to then where we were all searching our mobile phones for shopping and all that. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there now that in the private side that are really interesting businesses, but you gotta be careful, they can be ahead of themselves, right? Meaning we're not quite ready yet for adoption on that. But some that are gonna be the iPhones of the world that, change the world and move this thing along. And so to answer your question, that's what I'm most excited about on the private side, is trying to find those businesses that, like Steve Jobs, are gonna be the rebels, the ones that change the world. And I think that's all coming our way here in the next handful plus of years.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go to Foss again. Foss, so you're also involved, 3 of you are, in the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund. Which role do you play? What is the strength that you bring to the team?
I'm the soft marketing guy. I sweet talk people. No, okay. No, I mean, what do I bring to the table? Is 35 years of mistakes, right? You need to understand that when you're investing, let your winners ride and focus on your losers and get rid of your losers, because those things are the things that kill you. And it's very typical of human nature to sell your winners so you can go to the cocktail party and say, yeah, I doubled my money and I crystallized the gain. And then you left 97 turns of gains on the table. But then you hold on to your losers. You don't talk about them, but you hold on to them in hopes that they'll recover to your investment cost. And they never do. And so the most important thing is to manage risk by realizing that when you make a mistake, control that mistake. Don't double down. Don't be Peter Schiff, and I can't say it another way. So I'm an advisor like Larry, but the strength of our fund is in James Lavish and David Foley. And so I'm there to managing money is a horrible job. And why is managing money a horrible job? Because if you make money for your investors, they were so smart to put their money with you. But when you have a bad year, how did you convince me, Foss, you fraudulent fuck? You're the stupidest guy I've ever met. It's all your fault. So you take all the downside and you get none of the upside. It's just the way money management works. So it's a tough business. I've done it for a while. That being said, I believe that I am part of a team that truly has, hundreds of years of experience, has some of the smartest guys I know in this space. But here's the truth. I am so impressed by the talent in the Bitcoin community. And, the 2 kids that I met tonight, young kids, Purdue and Virginia Tech, coming to their first Bitcoin meetup. Why? It's Friday night. Yeah, guys, there's girls out there too, there's other things you can focus on. And
the smartest girls are in Bitcoin.
Okay, that's true too, which means I'm so proud to be part of this community. It's a community of givers. I learn all the time. I want more women in Bitcoin. I want more people of color in Bitcoin. I want more liberals in Bitcoin. And I'm not trying to say, and I'm not putting myself in a box. I'm just telling you that it's guys like Larry and me that really screwed the system up. And we need to get more people to show the opposite. And that's why Bitcoin is for everybody. And that's why I like it so much. And it's a unifying force, and it's built on, so Larry and I talked in this Thank God for Bitcoin conference before the big conference in Miami, and I thought it was an amazing experience. And I'm spiritual but not religious, but you can see the link between religion and Bitcoin. You might call it a cult, but it's not. It's just a belief system, and it believes in moral responsibility, truth, and honesty, and those are things I like to stand up for. So proud to be part of this room. I applaud you guys for coming out. I want to tell you that it means the world to me. And my wife and daughter couldn't actually believe when we were down in Miami. They actually saw in real time how much people appreciate the efforts that Larry and I put in. And I will tell you, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart that our efforts are being rewarded with friendships like you guys. I never would have met David, Anders. I wouldn't have met anyone in this room, quite honestly, if it wasn't for Bitcoin. And look at how lucky I am. So thank you guys, and let's make this happen. Thanks, guys.
It's definitely the best cult that I've ever been a part of. Yeah, time. Question on time. How are we doing on time? Yeah. Oh, stick with it. Okay. So
I'm gonna leave it to these guys to answer the questions, because I always dominate the stupid stuff. So. Thanks, guys. Yeah, good work.
All right, so we got a question for you. I can run with the mic and then.
We have one up there as well.
I wanted to jump before I forget the question, because my brain is like foggy, but Larry, shout out to Larry, because I'm a millennial, I'm 30, progressive left, but Larry, I think your talk on Peter talking about gold, that was one of those like mind-blowing things for me as well. Just opening that up. So Jason, and one thing I'll say too is progressives and people on the left get a little funny or weird when people talk about wealth and money. Right, just in general, it almost seems like a bad thing. So we talk about deflationary. So this is kind of, I think for everyone on the stage, can you talk structurally about why deflation will actually help the inequality crisis we have? Because that's something that, again, Keynesians will talk about, we need inflation, but we've seen, and I think Bitcoiners know, inequality is terrible. Under that system, the left really cares about inequality. So again, the more Bitcoiners can talk about.
No, it's a great question, and I care greatly about inequality. I want everyone to be a Bitcoiner. I mean, Bitcoin is for everybody, absolutely everybody. It's the people's money, as opposed to the government's money. So the best way to look at deflationary world and how good it is to think about what America looked like in 1789. It was a nation of farmers, basically. And to think about what America looked like, call it 1920, maybe 1930. I mean, the Federal Reserve started corrupting things in 1913. But from that, in that period, that 130, 140-year period, that was the greatest, and it obviously encompassed the Industrial Revolution and a lot of developments. And there was some bad behavior by big businesses and so forth. But in that period, the average living standard of the average American went up by like between 5 and 10x. I mean, it was really kind of amazing. I mean, they started off with outhouses and, shooting rabbits and squirrels for food, and they ended up with, 3 squares and plumbing and telephones and cars and the whole 9 yards. And there was no inflation during that period. There was no need for inflation, none, zero. I mean, the price of most things was measured, it was flat. The cost of something, and in fact, in many cases, the net price went down because we became more productive. And we had shoe factories and shirt factories and all kinds of things that allowed us to make things more cheaply, and so that more people could afford them. So the value of their houses didn't go up per se in nominal terms, and maybe their wages didn't go up per se unless they got a more productive job. But the value of where it would go, the way it would allow them to live, improved massively, absolutely massively. And all of the growth and investment came as more or less as equity investment, not as debt investment. And so nobody was getting free money. If you wanted to start a company, you had to go out and raise capital from other people who had savings, and those savings were used to build a company, and then the company generated profits, and the profits were given back to the people who made the initial investments in the company in the form of dividends. And debt really wasn't a thing. I mean, debt, there was debt, but not anything close to what we got now. And there were no debt slaves. There weren't people hooked on credit cards. There weren't 30-year mortgages. None of that. You kind of ate what you killed, and you paid what you could as you went along. Obviously, there were certain businesses that had a strong interest in selling more stuff, and so to the degree that the consumer hooked on debt to buy more stuff and grow, they were in favor of things like the Federal Reserve. But the fact that money was priced based on its equity value and its savings value, and the interest rate was set as the balance between savings and capital needs. So if there was excess savings, the interest rate went down, and therefore more marginal projects would get built. And if there was too much in the way of too little in the way of savings, the interest rates went up, and savers got more money in order to induce people to save. So there was a natural balance. And the big reason for the income inequality today, in my opinion, and I think anyone who studies it carefully will agree, because it got worse, it got substantially worse after 71. The Federal Reserve started the credit system, 71 turbocharged it. I mean, anyone who looks at the growth of the money supply or the growth of inflation, I mean, post-71, it's insane. I mean, we still had a semi-gold-based standard and not outrageous monetary growth throughout, you know, the 20th century, the 1900s, and with the exception of World War II, where we ran up quite high in order to defeat, you know, fascism. But the bottom line is it was a fairer system because nobody could get a hold of the money spigot. Nobody could borrow cheaply. And what happened after 71 is all of a sudden people who were smart, people who knew the inflation was going to be there, people who had capital and who were rich could go borrow more capital cheaply and deploy it in things where they got a huge return. And now it's gotten to the extreme, to the point where guys like Ken Griffin, you know, who runs Citadel, who has Bernanke as an advisor, probably getting paid $20 billion a year, okay, was able to borrow from the Fed at 0 and turn around and put it into a carry trade, multiplied 6 or 7 times at 6 or 7%. And this is how he's able to buy a $250 million penthouse in New York City. And when that trade went tits up, as it did in March of 2020, he called Bernanke. Bernanke called the guys at the Fed, and they gave him swap lines under the table. You know, and it's pretty well documented that it happened, but most people don't know that happened. But I mean, this is clear and blatant corruption, and that kind of thing. It started small, but it just got worse and worse. I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the president of Ford lived in the same town I lived in. He didn't live far from where we lived. And you know, a line worker at Ford probably back then was making 35 grand a year, which is a very good income in 1973. And the guy who ran Ford was probably making 250 grand a year. You know, maybe a tad less. But he was, you know, they were making 6, 7 times what the line worker. Today, the line worker at Ford is probably making 80 or 90 grand a year. The guy who runs Ford is probably making $15 million a year, maybe 20. And, you know, and stock options, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all because the system got corrupted by the corrupt money, and people were able to buy, and it's been cooked. The system is rigged for wealthy people. It's just absolutely rigged for wealthy people. I mean, if you go look at the income distribution, you see how, you know, you see the portion of the income, and this country produces a lot of stuff. The portion that went to the middle class was, you know, I don't know, was it 45%, you know, pre-1971. It slid down into the 20s. You know, and the portion that went to the 1% was, I don't know, 15%. It's gone up to 35%. So we've got all, and this is the thing that really amazes me. Think of how much, I mean, because I grew up in the 70s. Think of all the shit we have now that we didn't have in the 70s. We got the internet, we got cell phones, we got computers, we've eliminated all these mean, you know, these tough to do jobs. We should all be working 20 hours a week. I mean, the productivity enhancements that we've had in the last 50, you know, last 30, 40 years, they're stunning. They're absolutely stunning, and yet we all struggle to get by. And that's because the people at the top have sucked off that excess wealth. And we've got all these, you know, and this is, I'm very much a progressive in this respect. These billionaires.
You sound like one.
Yeah.
You sound like a little bit
I'm
over.
also a libertarian conservative, so I'm conflicted. But these people, these billionaires and these people who run the system have just sucked it bone dry. And you see it everywhere. I mean, how is Elizabeth Warren worth $60 million on a $280,000 a year salary? You know, how is who's that guy, the senator from Florida, Rick, whatever, the guy commits Medicare fraud at his company, right? You know, the company pays $1.4 billion in fines. He's got, you know, $500 million net worth, and he's a senator today. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it goes on and on and on. You know, the corruption here, and you know, in the military-industrial complex. I mean, don't even get me started on that, right? I mean, you know, the CIA murders Kennedy to prevent us from, you know, to make sure we got into the Vietnam War, right? And you know, and we attacked Iraq based on false premises. But you know what? Dick Cheney's a really rich man. You know, he's a really fucking rich man. Halliburton did extremely well. You know, the billions that went to Halliburton didn't go to the poor and middle class in the United States. They just didn't. And you know,
How does Bitcoin fix that? How do we just?
Bit-
My wife says, she goes, it's just going to happen again. All the people that have all the Bitcoin are going to be the rich people again. You know, like, and I say, no, it's
true, but think about it. Based on what you know about Bitcoiners, would you rather have Bitcoiners run the government or the guys we got running it right now? Based on what you know about Bitcoiners. I've often said, I truly believe, I think we'd be better off picking people randomly out of the fucking white pages and making them senators and congressmen than what we've got. I mean, we've got fucking adverse selection in our political process. I mean, people who are psychopathic and want something for nothing and like to control others, they get elected. And I mean, I'd much rather have my neighbor as my senator than have, than have Elizabeth Warren. I mean, and my neighbor's not very smart. But that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we can't foresee how it's all going to unfold, but I do know that first principles say in anything in life, in anything in human relations, that fairness is important. I mean, one thing we all react very negatively to is an unfair system. Animals in nature react to that. And what we've got here is a blatantly unfair system. I mean, we all knew in 2008, they should have let all those bankers go bankrupt. Lloyd Blankfein should be fucking bankrupt, okay? And he's a billionaire. He's got a $60 million house in the Hamptons, okay? If you go study what happened up in Iceland, they did the same thing. The banks up there got terribly, way over leveraged. They were pouring red paint on Mercedes and Porsches. And some of those guys went to jail. Some of the guys who ran the banks in Iceland. That's what we should have done. But we didn't. We bailed them out. Okay? And after we bailed them out, we got into another war, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so if you take the money away from these assholes, they can't do this shit.
But
So,
how do we make sure they don't take it back from us?
well,
Well, I think
12 words. 12 words, and a bunch of people who are pissed off with torches, who are willing to march on these government citadels. I mean, in a bigger picture sense, we are going from, we reached peak centralization, in my opinion, in World War II. We learned how to kill 60 million people in 5 years. It was a pretty amazing feat, right? That was peak centralization. Started with the Industrial Revolution, and then Henry Ford did it with the assembly line and so on and so forth. We really figured out how to kill a lot of people really quickly. And the good news is, we're now going down the decentralization slope. And, look at what's going on. Internet. I mean, the two things that are going to save the world, in my opinion, are the internet and Bitcoin. And the reason is the internet is breaking up the information monopoly. I mean, I heard from my son the other night, Tucker Carlson got 95 million views in one night on a fucking broadcast. CNN, bye. MSNBC, bye. All the major networks, goodbye. I mean, people are figuring the fuck out. They've been pissing on our leg and telling us it's raining, right? And we're going, we're figuring it the fuck out. We are, and we're just, we're going to fight back. And so that's what this is about. We get the goddamn money away from them, and we're going to fight back. I mean, Lloyd Blankfein's going to have $1 billion fiat dollars. It's going to be worthless, okay? I got a shitload of Bitcoin. I'm going to be fucking richer than that asshole. And I'm telling you, you want me in government, not him. I'm telling you that.
I can't vote for you, but okay. In 2020, we had Christina Freeland tell us she needed to unlock the savings of Canadians.
Oh,
She has successfully done it because 90% of us are poor, okay?
Yeah.
Then the rest that had a few dollars left that were still working and considered essential, she froze our accounts,
Right.
stole our money, had bank accounts in the US, closed the account and never send the money. Okay, we have people that are being sued, we have people that are under
$400
arrest.
million. BJ is facing.
I'm in it.
Are you? Yeah.
She started the.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the role you played in it.
That's okay.
Bravo.
And then we got Cass.
Okay, bravo to you. Bravo.
Thank you.
And he's
Yeah.
got criminal charges.
And he has,
Right.
he has criminal charges. And these guys came at us hard.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we make sure that before this collapse comes, because I agree, there is a collapse coming.
Right.
And it's gonna be hard, and people are gonna have, we have been so fluffy for so long that, life has been good.
Yep.
This is gonna be a hard pill, and they're gonna learn the things my grandmother did, of butter, the wrapper is what you line the pan with, because
Yep.
you don't throw that away.
That's right. Well, I
Right.
had a grandmother who she kept her wax paper
Right.
and reused it constantly. Yeah.
Right, so we're gonna learn to do those things, because
Yep.
it's gonna hurt.
Yep.
This is gonna hurt.
I think you're right.
But how do we ensure that these government jackasses don't put in policies prior to that to take what we've got left, because they know it's coming, and they know what we're gonna have.
Right, so the critical thing here, in my opinion, is that you self-custody your own Bitcoin in cold storage and you have 12 words. And that you be prepared when they come to your door to say Mola and Obey. And if you're in the United States with the Second Amendment, I don't know what the gun laws are in Canada. You know, but
They took away our people, guys.
Okay, but my point is, there are a lot of bad people in the world, including the WEF, who has a plan, agenda by 2030 to have CBDCs and completely reset the world, okay? There are a lot of bad people in the world, but we outnumber them massively, absolutely massively. And we've got these great decentralization tools called internet and Bitcoin.
And they're afraid of trucks.
Right. And we got big trucks. We got really big trucks. We got courageous drivers from Romania who are willing to paint their truck with really cool messages, right? And so, you know, the bottom line is we've all got to collectively fight back. I mean, as I've said to Marty Bent and Jack Mallers, there's going to be a hero generation here that at some point is going to stand up. I mean, I'm going to be the aging boomer, you know, like FDR, trying to help them out. But we've got Eisenhowers, and we've got young platoon leaders, and this generation, my kids can't buy a house, and they're doing fine. But I mean, you know, the youngest generation has been so screwed. I mean, absolutely. The boomers have all the wealth. They've messed the system up. They're not willing to reform it politically, and it's going to collapse on them. And, you know, then there's going to be a real scrum to see who gets the new power, okay? And I would submit that people will see that it's the money that's collapsed, and they will hopefully, you know, learn, if we've educated enough of them, they will learn that the right way out of this is to return to sound money and first principles. You know, and we'll get political reform, we'll maybe get term limits, a lot of things, and we'll move back towards the principles on which this country was founded, the founding documents, you know, of freedom and rule of law. Do you know
I
what
don't know about in the US, but there are a lot of lazy Canadians
Yep.
that live off my hard-earned work.
There are a lot of those people in the U.S. too. I mean, 30% of the U.S. receives,
Right.
you know, checks from the government.
But those people are the ones that are gonna support the government because they're talking about UBI and that's what they want. Protect me, take care of me. I don't wanna have to get off my couch and I don't wanna even have to take care of my kids.
Right.
I just want the money.
But even that still, they're gonna be outnumbered, and, you know, you're gonna be able to go out and shoot venison and field strip it and feed your family with meat, and they're gonna be sitting there wondering where the fuck is the check, and then when they're gonna get the check, it's gonna be $1,000, and that's gonna buy a loaf of bread. So, you know, keep learning how to field strip the meat, you know, keep saving in Bitcoin, make sure you got the guns and the hunting tools. I mean, it's not well known, but I've read a lot about the U.S. Depression. I mean, there was a big piece of the U.S. that would have starved during the Depression if basically the backwoods people hadn't known how to kill squirrels and rabbits. I mean, nobody could afford to eat. They were all fucking starving. And yet these guys were pretty good with guns. And squirrels and rabbits happen to represent protein. And, you know, you kind of feed yourself, right? I mean, and I'm not suggesting that's where we're going to go today. I mean, but I'm talking about, you know, there's going to be, you're right, this is going to be hard. There are going to be really, really hard times. And there's going to be some portion of the population that's going to follow some demagogue that's going to say, you know, vote for me, I'll give you everything you want. We'll print tons and tons of money. It's all going to be good. But what we are all going to know is that money is a fake promise. It's not going to be money good. It's going to fail. And once it does fail, then everyone's going to say, okay, now what do we do? What's the real solution? And the Bitcoiners, what I call the remnant, is going to rise up and say, okay, this is what we got to do. This is what we did wrong. This is what we got to do. We got to return to sound like saying. And I've studied history. If you look at hyperinflation, if you look at what happens on the backside of hyperinflation, when they return to sound money, things get better pretty quickly. People tend to, you know, okay, we got sound money. Okay, I get it. You know, I'll trade you this for that. You trade me this for that. And I mean, things get fixed. I mean, Japan and Germany were in ashes in 1946. And 10 years later, they were pretty decently functioning societies. You know, they both had hyperinflation. Their currencies were worthless, completely worthless, and everything had been bombed to shit. I mean, the good news about this kind of collapse is, if we can avoid getting into some kind of a stupid shooting war or you know, declaring war on China or something, we're not going to nuke all the plants and the facilities and the and the farms, and I mean, all the shit's still gonna be there, okay? What you don't wanna be, is you don't wanna be fat, lazy, and dependent on the government. You're screwed, as you should be, right? And what you don't wanna be is a big, fat fiat owner like Lloyd Blankfein, living in a $60 million mansion, because guess what? Somebody's gonna wanna come and take that. And so, I mean, if you wanna read more about this in depth, and what I really highly recommend, you need to buy the Mandibles. Show of hands, who in this room has read the Mandibles? The Mandibles by Schreiber. If you have not read this book, you gotta buy and read this book. This is by an author who wrote the story of an American family that went through a collapse of the dollar, theoretically between 2035 and 2045. And what's most interesting about it is every page you turn, something new happens, something kind of bad happens. And you're kind of like, oh, shit, I hadn't thought about that. And I mean, just odd stuff pops up, like a family that's destitute and, they've got an attractive 20-year-old daughter. Well, they have to, she has to become a prostitute to try to get money so that the family can eat. I mean, just those kinds of things, home invasions, I mean, you name it. It's a bleak book, but it paints a very interesting picture of what it might look like in a society. And it draws on, she studied the Weimar hyperinflation. It draws on bad financial events that have occurred in other countries in the past, including Weimar. So it's a book that's worth reading. It's disturbing, but it's worth reading. It does have a happy ending. Yeah, in the back.
I'll give you the mic in a second. I just want to add also to your question. Have you seen Scarface? He says something that is universally true. First you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women. Now for this discussion we can leave out the women part, but the power base, sorry?
You wanted more women in Bitcoin.
Yeah, we do need that. Yeah, that would be me. No, but the power base they have and the way they steal from us is because they have a money printer. So they're not asking for us money and we say, no, you can't have our money. No, we have money, all of us have dollars because we need it, and they print more, so they just steal value out of it, and you have a government in US that is spending way more than they get in taxes. And Trudeau is very good at not understanding a freaking budget. It's just printing, and he has no problem with it, and that's how they screw us. It's the money printer. So when we use Bitcoin instead, where they can't dilute it, then we have the power, because the power comes from the money. I'll give you the mic.
What do you think happens to like the value of real estate, like single-family homes and equities, as we head into like a hyperinflationary environment or the collapse of the dollar? Maybe not value in the dollars, but like purchasing power of these items.
Yeah, so both really great questions, and I've studied that in hyperinflation as well. First of all, the equity market will go up a lot, because an equity represents a claim on an underlying business. And if you study the 1920s, you look at, Mercedes-Benz was a company, Siemens was a company, okay, and people who owned equities in those companies, the Deutsche Mark became worthless. There was a time where you couldn't sell your stock. There was no stock market, right? There was no bid or ask. But if you held the stock, came out the other side, there was a new currency, they started making cars again. The stock, was priced at the value of the new cars they were making, and they actually maintained their purchasing power. If you look at the Venezuela, but that's because the economy recovered, okay? You look at the Venezuela case, the Venezuela stock market went berserk when Venezuela had hyperinflation. The country got destroyed, it never recovered. In real terms, yes, your Venezuelan stock market was straight up, but the Venezuelan peso was worthless, so effectively you did not. So stocks are tricky. The question is, will the economy recover and the stocks will reprice in the new currency or not? Siemens had assets that had value that once the hyperinflation event was over, returned to value, they refloated the stock you owned became valuable. Bonds, worthless, totally gone. Bonds, you're destroyed. People had millions of dollars of bonds, they would buy a loaf of bread, okay? The real estate, it's the same story. It's a real tangible asset. There's a limited supply of it, there's a cost to build it, etc. There may be a time when there's no bid for it. Everybody in the country is so poor, the company countries destroy, etc., you know, it's not necessarily a good place to store value if your time frame is 5 years. If you assume that the country will recover, which most countries that go through hyperinflation will, I mean, owning an oceanfront piece of land on Cape Cod is probably going to be something that's desirable to somebody in the new currency. And so it will then reprice in the new currency. But there could be a big window of time when there's no bid, right? So that's kind of what you got to consider, I think.
With real estate in particular, do you think it's better to have like those types of assets paid off, or do you think it's better to have them like as debt?
Well, that's, yeah, it's a Hugo Stinnes rate. That all goes to whether or not there's any chance of losing the debt, losing the property based on the debt. And so which goes to the income stream and your ability to service the debt. So, you know, think about it. If, as soon as you have debt, you can lose, and this is why I've said never leverage Bitcoin. That's great. You know, remember when Plan B was talking about Bitcoin was 150,000, right? Yeah, and everybody and the brother levered up. You know, they had one Bitcoin, they got 5, went down, boom, they just got blown out. That could happen in real estate. You know, the real estate value, you think, well, I've got rental income. Well, the renters could go away. You know, well, I've got a job, so I can always pay the mortgage. Better be a really good job. Will the job survive a depression? You sure you can pay the mortgage? Because if you can't pay the mortgage, the bank wants the house, right? So that the issue is, can you hang on to it through whatever the event is? I happen to not like real estate as an investment. I'll tell you why. The government has a first claim on it. As two reasons. One, you can't move it. It's there. Your government's fucked up. You can't go to another country, right? I mean, it's there. You're stuck, right? You're going to live in a government regime that's stuck. Two, the government's got a first claim on it. And one thing that's absolutely certain is, as Greg says, you know, fiat is programmed to debase. Governments are programmed to take your shit. You know, they're programmed to tax the shit out of you and take your shit. And, you know, I had a nice house in Wellesley. If I told you the taxes I had to pay on it, your blood would curl. I mean, it was unfucking believable. I didn't own the house. The town of Wellesley owned the house, right? I mean, seriously, the taxes I paid on it, if I were to rent the house out, the tax I paid on it was probably 75% of the rental value of the house. So effectively, the town owned 75% of my house, right? I mean, it's just, and that's only going to get worse, because one thing you can count on is these governments are going to try and grab shit. This is the other reason why I love Bitcoin. I mean, this is, you know, very